The space station called Harmony's Edge floated near a dying star. Every day, hundreds of ships came and went. Aliens of all shapes and sizes walked through its halls. They bought things, sold things, and never looked twice at anyone who was not their business. Deep in the station's forgotten belly, in a dark maintenance corridor that smelled of rust and old oil, a wolf mother named Rika was dying. She was not a normal wolf. Her species, the Valkyrie, were large creatures with silver-blue fur and golden eyes that glowed softly in the dark. They stood as tall as horses and were smart enough to speak, though most aliens did not care to listen. The Dominion fleet had created them long ago, engineering them in labs to be living weapons for a great war. They could track enemies across planets, fight in any environment, and survive wounds that would kill most beings. But the war had ended 15 years ago. The Valkyrie were no longer needed. Rika had been on a transport ship, heading to what the officials called a retirement facility. She knew what that really meant. She had seen other Valkyrie go to such places. None of them ever came back. Then pirates attacked the transport. In the chaos, Rika broke free from her cage. She grabbed her 3 cubs in her mouth, one by one, and ran. She found an escape pod and crashed it into the station. For 6 days now, she had been hiding in this corridor, bleeding from a deep wound in her side where shrapnel had cut her open. Her cubs pressed against her belly. They were small, no bigger than house cats, with soft fur and eyes that had not yet learned to glow. They were hungry. They were scared. But they did not cry. Rika had taught them early that crying brought danger, not help. She had activated the distress beacon in her collar on the first day. It was still blinking now, sending out a weak signal that said, "Help. Emergency. Life in danger." No one came. Station security had received the signal. They had looked at it, seen that it came from a Valkyrie, and deleted it. The Galactic Accord, the great alliance of alien species that ruled this part of space, had clear laws about the Valkyrie. They were classified as military equipment, property, not people. No one was required to help them, just as no one was required to help a broken chair or a damaged engine. Rika understood this. She had understood it her whole life. But understanding did not stop the pain, and it did not feed her cubs. She closed her eyes and waited for death. Far above, in the station's busy docking area, a human woman named Una Park was finishing her work. Una was 32 years old, with short black hair and tired eyes. She wore a worn jacket with too many pockets and boots that had walked across dozens of worlds. She owned a small cargo ship called the Second Chance, and she made her living hauling freight from one place to another. It was not exciting work, but it was honest, and it kept her fed. She had come to Harmony's Edge to pick up medical supplies for a frontier colony. The job was simple. Load the cargo, check the manifest, fly away. She had done it 1,000 times before. Una did not like to stay in one place too long. She did not like to make friends. She did not like to get involved in other people's problems. 5 years ago, she had been a corporal in Earth's Colonial Defense Force. Something had happened, something she never talked about, and she had received a dishonorable discharge. Now she lived alone on her ship, talking to no one except when business required it. That was how she liked it. She walked through the station's corridors, toward her docking bay, her mind already on the journey ahead. The colony was 3 days away. She would sleep, eat protein bars, and listen to old music from Earth. Simple, quiet, safe. Then her communicator beeped. She looked down at the small screen on her wrist. Her ship's sensors had picked up something, a distress signal coming from somewhere below. The signal was weak and old, which meant someone had been calling for help for a long time. Una frowned. She tapped the screen, looking for more information. The signal was tagged as Valkyrie. She knew what that meant. Everyone in the galaxy knew about the Valkyrie. created for war, abandoned after peace. There were stories about them. Some said they were dangerous monsters. Others said they were victims of a cruel system. Yuna had never met one and did not have strong feelings either way. What she did know was that a Valkyrie distress signal would be ignored by everyone on this station. That was just how things worked. She put away her communicator and kept walking. It was not her problem. She had a schedule. She had debts to pay. She had a life that only worked because she did not let herself care about things she could not change. She reached her docking bay. Her ship waited for her, small and ugly and reliable. She walked up the ramp and into the cockpit. She began the launch sequence. And then she heard it. It came through the station's walls, faint and far away, a sound that made her hands freeze over the controls. It was a howl, low and broken, full of pain and despair and something else. Something that sounded almost like a prayer. It was the sound of a mother calling for help that would never come. Yuna sat very still. Her finger hovered over the launch button. One press, and she would be gone. The sound would fade. She would forget it in a day or two. Life would go on. She thought about all the reasons to leave. The schedule. The debts. The simple fact that getting involved always led to pain. Then she thought about the howl. She had heard sounds like that before. During her time in the Defense Force, she had heard them from soldiers who had been left behind, from civilians caught in crossfire, from people who had realized that no one was coming to save them. She had walked away from those sounds once. She had followed orders, done her duty, and left people to die because it was not her mission to save them. That decision had cost her everything. Her rank, her honor, her ability to sleep without nightmares. Yuna closed her eyes. "Damn it," she whispered. She turned off the launch sequence. She stood up from her chair. She walked down the ramp and back into the station. The howl had stopped, but she could still hear it echoing in her mind. She followed the distress signal on her communicator, going deeper into the station, into corridors that grew darker and dirtier with every step. She did not know what she would find. She did not know if she could help. She only knew that she could not fly away, not this time. The maintenance corridor was dark and cold. Water dripped from pipes above, and the floor was covered with years of dust and forgotten garbage. Yuna walked slowly, following the signal on her communicator. The red dot grew brighter with each step. She found them behind a broken ventilation unit. The Wolf Mother was bigger than Yuna had expected. Even lying on her side, Rika was massive. Her body stretched nearly 3 meters from nose to tail. Her silver blue fur was matted with dried blood, and her breathing came in short, painful gasps. A wound on her left side was still bleeding slowly, the flesh torn open by something sharp and cruel. 3 small shapes pressed against her belly. The cubs were tiny, their eyes wide and frightened as they watched Yuna approach. They did not make a sound. Yuna stopped a few meters away. She had never been this close to a Valkyrie before. She could see the intelligence in the mother's golden eyes. This was not a beast looking at her. This was a person. "I am not going to hurt you," Yuna said softly. Rika watched her but did not move. She had seen other aliens pass by this corridor over the past 6 days. Some had looked at her with disgust. Others with fear. Most had simply walked away without a second glance. She expected this human to do the same. Yuna knelt down, keeping her movements slow and gentle. She looked at the wound on Rika's side and felt her stomach tighten. The injury was bad, very bad. Without medical help, the Wolf Mother would die soon. Maybe within hours. "I am going to call Station Medical," Yuna said. "Just hold on." She activated her communicator and connected to the station's emergency line. A bored voice answered. "Harmony's Edge Medical Services. State your emergency." I found an injured Valkyrie in Maintenance Quarter 7, Una said. She needs surgery immediately. She has 3 young cubs with her. There was a pause. Then the voice returned, even more bored than before. Valkyrie are classified as Dominion property under Galactic Accord Regulation 447B. We cannot allocate medical resources to non-citizens without proper authorization. She is dying. If you wish to file a salvage claim for the animals, you can submit Form 89C to the Property Recovery Office. Processing time is approximately 3 standard weeks. Is there anything else I can help you with? Una stared at her communicator. Her hand was shaking. They are not animals, she said. They are alive. They need help. Ma'am, I understand your concern, but the regulations are clear. Valkyrie have no legal standing under the Accord. If you attempt to interfere with classified military property without authorization, you may face criminal charges. Have a pleasant day. The line went dead. Una stood up. Her whole body felt hot with anger. She looked down at Rika, at the cubs, at the blood slowly pooling on the floor. Stay here, she said. I am going to fix this. She marched through the station corridors until she reached the administrative center. The office was clean and bright, a sharp contrast to the dark place she had just left. Behind a desk sat a Thelian named Korvax, a tall, gray-skinned alien with 4 eyes that all turned to look at Una as she entered. Can I help you? Korvax asked. His voice was flat, without emotion. There is a dying Valkyrie in your station, Una said. She has 3 cubs. Your medical team refused to help. I want to know why. Korvax blinked slowly. The regulations are clear. Valkyrie are classified as... I know what they're classified as. I'm asking you to do something about it. The administrator folded his long fingers together. Human, I understand that your species has emotional responses to such situations. But the Galactic Accord exists to maintain order across hundreds of worlds and thousands of species. We cannot make exceptions based on individual feelings. She is going to die. Yes, probably. Korvax tilted his head. The Valkyrie were created for war. When the war ended, they became inconvenient. The Accord decided that the most efficient solution was gradual elimination. No new breeding. Retirement facilities for survivors. Within 2 generations, the Valkyrie will no longer exist. It is sad, perhaps, but it is orderly. Una felt sick. You are talking about killing an entire species. I am talking about managing a problem that was created by poor decisions made decades ago. The Valkyrie were never meant to live normal lives. They were weapons. You cannot blame a government for disposing of weapons it no longer needs. They are not weapons. They are mothers and children. Korvax made a sound that might have been a sigh. If you wish to help them, there is a legal process. You would need to file a salvage claim, pay quarantine fees, accept liability for any damage they cause, and wait for processing. The total cost would be approximately 50,000 credits, and the waiting time would be 3 standard weeks. She does not have 3 weeks. She has hours. Then I am afraid there is nothing I can do. Korvax turned back to his work. Good day, human. Una stood there for a long moment. She thought about all the things she could say, all the arguments she could make. But she knew it would not matter. The system was not broken. It was working exactly as designed. It was designed to let creatures like Rika die quietly, without causing trouble for anyone. She left the office without another word. When she returned to the maintenance corridor, Rika was still awake. The Wolf Mother's eyes followed Una as she approached. No help is coming, Una said quietly. They do not care. Rika blinked slowly. She had known this already. Una sat down on the dirty floor, not caring about her clothes. She looked at the cubs, so small, so afraid, pressing against their mother as if she could protect them from everything bad in the universe. She thought about her ship. It was not designed for passengers, but it had a cargo hold with climate control. She thought about her medical kit, basic supplies, nothing fancy, but maybe enough to keep someone alive for a few days. She thought about Dr. Taiho Shin, a name she had heard years ago, a xenobiologist who had lost his license for helping Valkyrie. He lived somewhere on the frontier, if he was still alive. She thought about all the reasons this was a bad idea. She could lose her ship. She could lose her license. She could end up in prison for stealing military property. Then she looked at the smallest cub. It was watching her with eyes that were too old for its tiny body. Eyes that had seen too much pain already. "I am going to do something stupid," Yuna said to Rika. "But I need you to trust me." "Can you do that?" The Wolf mother was silent for a long moment. Then she blinked once, slowly. It might have meant yes. It might have meant nothing. But it was enough. Yuna reached out and gently picked up the smallest cub. It was warm and trembling, lighter than she expected. It did not struggle or cry. It just looked at her with those ancient eyes. "I will come back for the others," she whispered. "And then I will come back for your mother. I promise." She carried the cub out of the corridor and toward her ship. The choice was made. There was no going back now. Getting the cubs onto her ship was easier than Yuna expected. They were quiet and obedient, following the first one's example. They curled up together in a corner of the cargo hold, watching her with their strange golden eyes. Getting Rika onto the ship was much harder. The Wolf mother could barely walk. Each step made her wound bleed more, and she had to stop every few meters to rest. Yuna half carried, half dragged her through empty corridors, praying that no one would see them. By the time they reached the second chance, both of them were covered in blood. Yuna settled Rika in the cargo hold with her cubs. The Wolf mother collapsed onto a pile of emergency blankets, her breathing shallow and fast. The cubs immediately pressed against her, making soft sounds of worry. "I need to stop the bleeding," Yuna said. She grabbed her medical kit and opened it. Inside were bandages, antiseptic, painkillers, basic supplies for human injuries. She had no idea if any of it would work on a Valkyrie. She did her best. She cleaned the wound, applied pressure, and wrapped it tightly with bandages. The bleeding slowed but did not stop completely. Rika needed real surgery from someone who understood her biology. Yuna ran to the cockpit and began the launch sequence. Her hands were shaking. She had never stolen military property before. She had never broken so many laws in a single hour. She contacted the docking control office. A young man's face appeared on her screen, a human, probably in his 20s, with nervous eyes and a uniform that did not quite fit. "Docking control. This is the second chance requesting departure clearance," Yuna said. Trying to keep her voice calm, the young man looked at something on his own screen. His eyes widened slightly. "Second chance. I am showing unusual biosigns on your manifest." "Can you explain?" Yuna's heart stopped. They already knew. "It is just cargo," she said. "Medical supplies. The biosigns might be from the organic samples." The young man, his name tag said Hyam, looked at her through the screen. He looked at his data again. Yuna could see him thinking, weighing his options. "Ma'am," he said slowly, "I am showing 4 Valkyrie life signatures on your ship. That is not organic samples." Yuna closed her eyes. It was over. Security would come. They would take Rika and the cubs. Everything she had done would mean nothing. "Please," she said quietly. "She is dying. Her cubs are just babies. No one else will help them." Hyan was silent for a long moment. He was 24 years old and had come to Harmonies. EDGE is part of Earth's cultural exchange program. He had wanted to see the galaxy, to learn about other species, to make a difference. Instead, he had spent 2 years behind a desk, approving cargo manifests and watching ships come and go. He had seen the Valkyrie distress signal 6 days ago. He had watched his supervisors delete it. He had said nothing because saying something would have cost him his job, his career, everything he had worked for. He had hated himself every day since. Now he looked at this woman on his screen, tired, desperate, covered in blood, and he thought about the kind of person he wanted to be. "You have a fuel leak," he said flatly. Yuna blinked. "What? Your ship has a fuel leak. Very dangerous. I am authorizing emergency departure for immediate repairs at a certified facility. You need to leave now, before the leak causes an explosion." Understanding dawned on Yuna's face. "Yes, a fuel leak. I need to leave immediately. Departure clearance granted. You have 4 minutes before anyone notices the irregularity in my logs." Hyam looked directly into the camera. "Good luck." The screen went dark. Yuna launched a second chance so fast that she nearly crashed into another ship on the way out. She did not breathe until she was clear of the station, heading into open space at maximum speed for exactly 47 minutes. She thought she might actually escape. Then her sensors detected 3 ships following her. They were small, fast, and heavily armed Dominion remnant interceptors. The remnant were former military officers who refused to accept that the war was over. They believed the Valkyrie still belonged to the Dominion, and they hunted any surviving wolves with religious determination. They had automated trackers on every Valkyrie collar trackers that Yuna had no way to remove. Her communicator crackled. A cold voice filled the cockpit. "Unknown vessel, you are carrying stolen military property. Cut your engines and prepare to be boarded. If you resist, you will be destroyed." Yuna looked at her ship's specifications. The second chance was a cargo hauler, not a fighter. She had no weapons, no shields, nothing that could stand against military interceptors. She looked at the navigation chart. There was an asteroid belt nearby, a dangerous place full of rocks and debris. Larger ships avoided it because the navigation was too tricky, but the second chance was small. And Yuna had been flying these shipping lanes for 5 years. "Hold on back there," she said over the internal comm. "This is going to be rough." She turned toward the asteroid belt and pushed her engines to their limit. The interceptors followed. What came next was the longest hour of Yuna's life. She flew through the asteroid belt like a madwoman, weaving between rocks the size of buildings, using every trick she had learned in her years as a hauler. The interceptors were faster, but they were also bigger and less maneuverable. One of them clipped an asteroid and exploded. Another lost control and had to retreat, but the third one stayed on her tail, and Rika was getting worse. Yuna could hear the wolf mother's labor breathing over the internal comm. Without surgery soon, she would die. Yuna made a call she never thought she would make. She had heard rumors about Dr. Taiho Shin for years. He had been one of the best xenobiologists in the galaxy until he started speaking publicly about Valkyrie rights. The medical board had revoked his license. The government had seized his property. He had disappeared into the frontier, and most people assumed he was dead. But Yuna had contacts in the shipping business, and those contacts knew things that official records did not. She pulled up a frequency that was supposed to be abandoned and sent out a message. "Dr. Shin, if you are listening, my name is Yuna Park. I have a dying Valkyrie mother and 3 cubs on my ship. I have remnant interceptors on my tail. I need help." Static, silence, nothing. Then, after what felt like forever, a voice old, tired, but surprisingly calm. "Send me your coordinates. I will prepare for surgery." Yuna nearly cried with relief. She transmitted her location, and changed course for a small moon on the edge of charted space behind her. The last interceptor gave up the chase as she entered an area outside Galactic HFY jurisdiction. For now, they were safe, but Yuna knew this was only the beginning. The remnant would not give up. They would track her, hunt her, and eventually find her. She looked back toward the cargo hold, where a mother and her children were fighting to survive. Whatever came next, she would face it. She had made her choice, and she would not run from it. The moon had no name, just a number in some old mining catalog. Its surface was gray and rocky, covered with the ruins of operations that had closed decades ago. Dr. Taiho Shin lived in one of those abandoned facilities, a converted mining station that he had turned into a secret clinic. Yuna landed hard. Too hard. She heard something crack beneath the ship, and warning lights flashed across her console. The landing struts were damaged. The second chance was not going anywhere for a while, but she did not care. All that mattered was the Wolf Mother in her cargo hold, whose breathing had become dangerously slow. Dr. Shin was waiting outside when she opened the hatch. He was older than she expected, maybe 70, with white hair and a face lined with years of difficult choices. But his eyes were sharp, and his hands were steady as he helped carry Rika into the clinic. The surgical bay was small, but clean. Medical equipment lined the walls, some of it clearly jury-rigged from mining machinery. Dr. Shin worked quickly, hooking Rika up to monitors and preparing his instruments. "The shrapnel nicked an artery," he said, examining the wound. "She has lost too much blood. I need to operate immediately. Will she survive?" Yuna asked. "I do not know." Dr. Shin looked at her. "But I will do everything I can. You saved her life by bringing her here. Now let me try to keep her alive." He gestured toward the door. "The cubs need someone with them. They are frightened. Can you stay with them?" Yuna nodded. She walked to a small room where the 3 cubs had been placed. They were huddled together in a corner, their small bodies trembling. When they saw Yuna, they did not run away. Instead, they watched her with eyes that seemed to hold 1,000 questions. She sat down on the floor near them, not too close, giving them space. "Your mother is going to be okay," she said softly. She did not know if this was true, but she said it anyway. "Dr. Shin is the best. He will take care of her." The smallest cub made a tiny sound, not quite a whimper, not quite a word. It crawled toward Yuna and pressed its warm body against her leg. Something inside Yuna's chest broke open. She had spent 5 years running from connection, from responsibility, from caring about anything beyond her own survival. Now she sat on a dirty floor on a nameless moon with 3 orphaned cubs who had chosen to trust her, and she felt tears running down her face. She gathered the cubs gently against her chest. They were so small, so helpless, so completely dependent on the kindness of strangers who had every reason to look away. "I'm not going to let anything happen to you," she whispered. "I promise." The surgery lasted 6 hours. Yuna did not sleep. She stayed with the cubs, holding them, talking to them in a soft voice, telling them stories about Earth that she had not thought about in years. She told them about oceans and mountains and forests. She told them about dogs, the wolves of her home planet, and how humans had loved them for thousands of years. The cubs listened as if they understood every word. Finally, Dr. Shin emerged from the surgical bay. He looked exhausted but calm. "She will live," he said. "The surgery was successful. She needs rest, but she will recover." Yuna felt her whole body sag with relief. "Thank you. Thank you so much." Dr. Shin sat down heavily in a chair. "You should know what you have done, young woman. You have stolen military property. You have fled a court jurisdiction. You have harbored illegal aliens. If they catch you, You will spend the rest of your life in prison. I know. And you did it anyway. He looked at her with something like wonder. Why? Yuna thought about the question. Because someone had to. Dr. Shin smiled, the first smile she had seen from him. That is the most human answer I have ever heard. Their moment of peace did not last long. 3 hours later, Yuna's ship sensors, still working despite the damaged struts, detected incoming vessels. 3 remnant interceptors, dropping out of hyperspace above the moon. Commander Daewon-Oh contacted them directly. His face appeared on the clinic's communication screen. A hard face, with cold eyes and a military bearing that spoke of decades of war. You are harboring stolen property, he said. Surrender the Volcari immediately, and we will allow you to leave with your lives. This is your only warning. Yuna stood in front of the screen, blocking his view of the room where Rika was recovering. They are not property. They are a family. They are weapons, Commander O said. They were designed to kill. They were built for war. That is their only purpose. Their purpose is whatever they choose it to be. Just like the rest of us. Commander O's expression did not change. You have 1 hour to comply. After that, we will take them by force. The screen went dark. Dr. Shin looked at Yuna. We cannot fight them. This facility has no weapons, no shields, nothing. I know. Yuna's mind was racing. She thought about the situation: 3 military ships against 2 unarmed civilians and 4 Volcari who could barely stand. There was no way to win, but maybe there was a way to not lose. She thought about Hyun, the young dock controller who had let her escape. He had taken a risk because he believed in something. Maybe there were others like him. She opened a communication channel not to the remnant, but to every frequency she could reach. She broadcast on open channels, public frequencies, news networks, anything that would listen. My name is Yuna Park. I am a human cargo hauler from Earth. I am currently on an unnamed moon in the outer territories, surrounded by remnant military forces. They want to kill a mother wolf and her 3 cubs because the law says they are property, not people. She looked at the cubs, who had followed her into the room. She looked at Dr. Shin, who was watching with wide eyes. She looked at the screen, where camera feeds from her ship showed the remnant ships circling above. I am asking anyone who can hear this to help. Not with weapons, not with violence. Just by watching. Just by remembering. The Galactic Accord says these creatures have no rights, no value, no place in the universe. I am asking you to prove them wrong. She ended the transmission. For a long time, nothing happened. Then, slowly responses began to arrive. Messages from humans on distant colonies who had seen the broadcast. Messages from other species who believed the Accord's laws were unjust. Messages from journalists, activists, ordinary people who had seen footage of the cubs and felt something stir in their hearts. The story spread across the galactic network faster than Yuna could have imagined. Within hours, millions of beings were watching Dot, and then, impossibly, help arrived. A colony ship appeared on sensors, the New Dawn, carrying 3,000 human settlers to a new world. Its captain, a woman named Ji-Won Kang, hailed the remnant vessels directly. This is Captain Ji-Won Kang of the New Dawn. The Volcari on that moon are under human protection now. Any hostile action against them will be considered an act of war against the Terran coalition. It was a bluff. Captain Kang had no authority to speak for the coalition. Her colony ship had no weapons that could threaten military interceptors, but the remnant did not know that. And millions of beings were watching. Commander O was silent for a long moment. His face showed nothing, but Yuna can imagine the calculations running through his mind. Was this worth a diplomatic incident? Was this worth being seen by the galaxy as the man who killed cubs for following outdated laws? Finally, he spoke. This is not over. His voice was flat and cold. "The law is the law. The Valkyrie belonged to the Dominion." But as he spoke, his ships were turning away. They jumped to hyperspace and disappeared. Yuna collapsed against the wall, her legs suddenly unable to hold her. They had won. Somehow, impossibly, they had won. 3 months had passed since the standoff on the nameless moon. The frontier colony of Haven's Rest was a small settlement on a green world, far from Galactic HFY space. It had been founded by humans who wanted to build something new, something better, something outside the rules and laws that governed the rest of the galaxy. Yuna had never planned to stay. Her ship was repaired. The shipping lanes were open. She could have left at any time, but every time she thought about leaving, she would look out her window and see the cubs playing in the meadow below. And she would decide to stay just one more day. The cubs had names now. The human children of the colony had named them Bile, which meant star, because her eyes glowed the brightest in the dark. Dari, which meant bridge, because she was always the first to greet strangers. And Nuri, which meant world, because he was curious about everything and wanted to explore every corner of his new home. They had grown in 3 months, not much bigger, but stronger, healthier, more confident. They played with the human children as if they had known them their whole lives. They chased butterflies through the tall grass. They learned to fish in the river that ran past the colony. They slept in warm beds with soft blankets, and they woke up every morning knowing they were safe. Rika had healed completely. The scar on her side would always be there, a reminder of how close she had come to death. But her fur had grown back thick and silver blue, and her golden eyes glowed with a light that Yuna had never seen before, a light that she slowly realized was happiness. The galaxy had not forgotten about them. Yuna's BROADCAST had started something much bigger than she had intended. Millions of beings had seen the footage of Rika and her cubs. They had watched the standoff with the remnant. They had seen a human woman stand alone against military ships, armed with nothing but a mother's desperation and a stubborn refusal to give up. Now, across dozens of worlds, movements were growing. Petitions were being filed. Protests were being organized. The Galactic Accord was facing pressure to reclassify the Valkyrie as sentient beings with legal rights. Thought it was slow work. Bureaucracies did not change quickly. But for the first time in decades, people were talking about the Valkyrie not as weapons or property, but as people who deserved a chance to live. Dr. Taiho Shin had reopened his practice, this time legally. The human colonies on the frontier had granted him a medical license, and he was training a new generation of doctors who specialized in Valkyrie medicine. He visited Haven's Rest once a month to check on Rika and the cubs, and each time he left, he looked a little less tired, a little more hopeful. Hyan, the young controller who had let Yuna escape, had resigned from his position. He now worked as an advocate for Valkyrie rights, traveling between worlds and speaking to anyone who would listen. He had testified before the Accord Council, describing the day he had chosen to ignore regulations and help a stranger save a family. His testimony had been broadcast across the galaxy. Commander Daewon Oh had disappeared. Some said he had been reassigned to a remote outpost. Others said he had resigned in disgrace. Yuna did not care. All that mattered was that he was gone, and the remnant was weaker without him. Captain Jiwon Kang had become something of a celebrity. Her colony ship had continued to its destination, and the New Dawn settlement was thriving. She and Yuna exchanged messages sometimes. 2 women who had done something impossible and were still trying to understand why. On a warm evening, as the sun set over Haven's Rest and painted the sky in shades of orange and purple, Yuna sat on the porch of her small cabin. It was not much, just 2 rooms and a kitchen, but it was hers. the first real home she had owned in years. Rika lay beside her, massive head resting on her front paws. The wolf mother had learned to speak through a translator collar, a gift from the colony's engineers, and her voice was deep and resonant, with harmonics that made human words sound like music in the distance. The cubs were playing with a group of human children. Their joyful howls carried on the evening breeze, mixing with human laughter in a sound that should have been impossible. "You could have left," Rika said quietly. "You had your ship. You had your freedom. You had no reason to stay." Una watched the cubs chase each other through the tall grass. Bile was in the lead, her small legs moving faster than her siblings. Behind them, a human girl named Minji was struggling to keep up, laughing so hard she could barely run. "No," Una agreed. "I had no reason. Then why?" Una thought about the question. She had asked herself the same thing many times over the past 3 months. She thought about the day she had heard Rika's howl through the station walls, the broken sound of a mother with no hope left. She thought about the choice she had made, and all the choices that came after. She thought about the life she had built, here on this small world at the edge of known space. She thought about the person she used to be, a discharged soldier who kept her head down, minded her own business, and never got involved. She had told herself that was wisdom. She had told herself that caring only led to pain. She had been wrong. "Because someone should have helped you," Una said finally. "A long time ago, before the war ended, before your people were abandoned, someone should have stood up and said that this was wrong. Someone should have fought for you. But no one did." She looked at Rika. "I could not change the past, but I could change that moment. I could be the person who finally said no, who finally helped." Rika was quiet for a long time. Then she lifted her great head and pressed her nose gently against Una's shoulder. "Among my people," she said, "we have a word for someone who gives without expecting anything in return. Someone who sees suffering and cannot walk away. We call them hearthkeepers because they carry warmth wherever they go, and they share it with anyone who needs it." Una felt tears prick her eyes. "That is a beautiful word. You are a beautiful soul." In the meadow below, the cubs had stopped playing. They were sitting in a circle with the human children, all of them looking up at the sky where the first stars were beginning to appear. Nori pointed at a bright star with his paw, and a little boy named June tried to teach him its name in Korean. The universe was vast and often cruel. There were still remnant hunters in the darkness. Still laws that said the Valkyrie were property. Still bureaucrats who would rather let creatures die than bend a regulation. But here, on this small world, a human woman and a wolf mother sat together and watched their children play under the stars. Here, there was warmth and hope and the stubborn belief that tomorrow could be better than today. "What happens now?" Rika asked. Una smiled. "Now we live. We raise these cubs to know they are loved. We show the galaxy that the Valkyrie are worth saving. We fight for every small victory until the big ones come." "And if they never come? The big victories?" Una looked at the children and the meadow human and Valkyrie together, sharing laughter and stars and the simple joy of being alive. "Then the small ones will have to be enough," she said. "And I think they are." Rika's tail thumped softly against the porch dawn in the distance. The cubs began to howl, not in fear, not in desperation, but in simple, uncomplicated happiness. The sound rose into the evening air and spread across the valley, carrying with it a message that the universe had tried to silence for too long. "We are here. We are alive. We are home." And somewhere in the darkness between stars, beings of 100 species heard that howl and felt something stir in their hearts. They did not know what it meant. They did not understand why it moved them so deeply, but they remembered. And that was how change began, not with armies or laws or grand speeches, but with one person who heard a cry for help and refused to look away. One person who made a choice. One person who proved that the smallest act of kindness could echo across the universe. Yuna leaned back in her chair and closed her eyes, listening to the cubs howl at the stars. For the first time in 5 years, she was at peace. For the first time in her life, she was home.